I believe that one of the key factors in determining whether a piece of media will be successful or not is originality in concept. A show with a compelling or interesting premise that gets you thinking of all the possibilities it could have has a pretty good chance at grabbing a sizable audience. Some of the most popular anime of all time boast some of the most outrageous and absurd premises. Consider shows like Death Note, Attack on Titan, and One Punch Man. The basic premise of each show can be summed up in a single sentence that to a newcomer will instantly grab their attention. I say all this because, in my opinion, Dr. Stone has a pretty dang good concept that is guaranteed to have your investment after only the first 5 minutes. That being the strange occurrence where literally everyone on Earth is turned into stone. That, in and of itself, is incredibly marketable. Just hearing that leaves you with 1,000 questions and ideas for how a story set in that world might play out. But that's not all. Dr. Stone doesn't just revolve around one good idea, but several. The second real stinger comes after everybody gets turned to stone by some mysterious green light. Thousands of years go by before just a few people get reanimated. That's a second really cool idea. But this show isn't done yet. No, far from done. Our main hero turns out to be a huge science whiz and instantly starts coming up with methods on how to build shelter and find food in order to survive. This is the show's third great concept. Essentially, the first few episodes are solely dedicated to those two kids, the nerdy science whiz and the dumb jock, figuring out how to develop primitive technology. It's literally like one of those YouTube videos you might find where some jungle kids build a mud hut swimming pool or something. It's actually pretty great. But it's not just that they build cool things. No, it's not like Jimmy Neutron or something where they magically whip up some devices out of nowhere. This show takes the time to walk through, step by step, the process of creating something like alcohol or mortar or soap from start to finish using the limited resources available to our characters. And that's something I really like about this show. Sure, the circumstances that led to this scenario are very unusual and beyond what reason can explain, but you know what? It doesn't matter. Using the power of science, they can tackle any problem they face. There's a whole bit dedicated to them creating the mixture for gunpowder, and it's so entertaining. First, they gather some nitric acid they found in a cave, and then they get a ton of seashells together and grind them up into dust, and then they collect charcoal by burning some wood down, and then finally they travel like a whole country away to find some sulfur by some hot springs on a mountain. They chuck all that stuff together, and bam, gunpowder. Like seriously, it's so addicting. If this show was literally nothing but two dudes inventing stuff that has already been invented but using primitive technology and resources, even if it was like for 100 episodes or something, I would probably watch that. Honestly, I didn't know I needed a show like this until I got it. But unfortunately, it's not all about that. And that's where the show's failings start to pop up. And that's with the characters themselves. First off, our main character design is rather questionable. Sometimes I actually buy into it. Like, yeah, you know, it kinda does look cool, I guess. But then I snap out of it and remember he's literally got a head of celery for hair. Like, the hair itself is kinda dumb, but it would still be okay if it weren't for the green highlights. Like, I can't stop seeing the vegetables sprout out of his head. I don't know what to do about that. Moreover, I think his color palette as a whole is pretty bad. I do like the attempt to keep it earthy and neutral, because that fits the subject of the show, but I don't know, the blonde hair does not mesh well with his cream-colored coat and his skin color. It's visually noisy, as in it screws with the clarity of his design. Basically, a lot of different parts of his body are colored nearly the same, so I always have to focus to make out what I'm looking at exactly. It's just a little too visually confusing to easily take in. Disregarding the design for a moment, I think his personality is likable enough. At first, I was super worried he was gonna be that standard anime 200 billion IQ kid who's just so flippin' woke and several intelligence tiers above the average mortal man. I mean, he kinda is, but for some reason, it's not totally insufferable. I think it has to do with the fact that despite being so smart, he's really goofy. He doesn't take himself all that seriously. He knows he's got a big brain, but he doesn't flaunt it around all the time, like every other big brain anime boy does. He's also capable of displaying empathy, which for a character of his intelligence is quite abnormal. His entire purpose is to save people, and that in and of itself is a likable quality. So while at first I wasn't really fond of him, after 6 episodes I can say he's pretty good. The sidekick guy is also pretty good. He's a big-hearted, buff doofus that serves as a pretty good partner for our main hero. He's not a terribly deep or interesting character in any way, but there's a charm at seeing him interact with Senku, if that's his name, and their two polar opposite personalities work off of one another. I think the addition of the girl sort of ruins that dynamic, but she hasn't been around long enough and might still add something to the equation, so who knows? The real legitimate problems arise when discussing the villain. Whatever sense of being grounded in realism this show had is immediately thrown out the window with his introduction. In his first few moments of being on screen, he one-shots a lion with a single punch. And then he goes on to punch through boulders, jump off cliffs, and catch birds midair, and tackle entire armies of pigs to death. I just don't understand why a show that spent so long getting the viewer to accept this world as being quote-unquote scientifically grounded would just throw it all out the window for the sake of some generic anime action moments. This guy quite literally ruins every scene he is in. He's an insufferable, generic anime pretty boy with some stupid ideology that makes absolutely no sense, but it doesn't have to because he's so deep, man. Every line of dialogue from him is nauseating and his motivations are so shoddy. Okay, get this. He wants to create a world where there will be no grown-ups so that there will be no quote-unquote corruption and evil in the world because some kid got beat up one time for picking up seashells? What? Is that supposed to be a backstory? What kind of justification is that? And then he goes out and murders every adult he can find so that the young can inherit the earth or something stupid like that? It's so dumb and so annoying that I might just stop watching this show if this guy keeps getting all the screen time. It's that bad. Unfortunately, it does seem like that's the direction this show is heading. Instead of focusing on the cool and unique premise dealing with the primitive science stuff, the show wants to spend all its time on some by-the-books pretty boy villain and his evil scheme that's been done before in a million other generic and by-the-books anime. It really feels like somebody had a really awesome, fresh and original show pitch that they brought to some studio that got accepted into being a full production on the one stipulation that the executives could throw in whatever ideas they felt made a series successful. Or maybe he really was an original creation by the original author, I don't know. So now we have a show that is both super cool and original, being plagued by a silly and uninspired antagonist. Whatever though. I hope that things can somehow get more interesting than what it is now, because I really do like the stuff that's here, and it would be a shame to just abandon it because it got ruined by the curse of bad anime tropes. As for the visuals, I kind of touched on it earlier, but I think the character's art style is a little too blocky and too anime-ish, but it's not to the extreme to push me away or anything. The animation is generally pretty stiff and doesn't move a whole lot, but the art is consistent, so that's great. The only inconsistency in the animation is when it becomes super good on the odd occasion, so I guess that's a plus. Better than the quality dropping down now and then. The soundtrack is good, nothing too memorable, but it works well enough. The opening is also fine. It's not flashy or gripping like some others, but it does have a lot of interesting visuals that stick out in my brain. Overall, I'd say that this anime is worth giving a watch. It's got an amazing premise, fun characters, and a good old-fashioned sense of adventure. The only thing really holding it back is the antagonist and some quirky anime tropes. I'm going to keep watching it because I feel like it has a lot of good stuff coming up, despite its growing problems. And I think you should too.